What's going on, guys? It's your boy the Markham Knight here. Today's video is going to be all about Superman. With the movie coming out in less than 2 months, I want to get into one of the most hotly debated arguments that people are having, and that is Henry Cavill versus David Corenswet. Who is the better Superman? So in this video, I'm going to get into some qualities that I think Superman has, and I'm going to compare and contrast how Henry and David do it differently, and who I think is the better overall Superman. So let's get right into it. The first thing I want to talk about is their appearance. So we can cross off right off the bat, blue eyes, dark hair, Caucasian. So both of them have that. But when you look at Henry Cavill's Superman, I would say his face is a little more chiseled, a little more angular, looks kind of a little bit like a Kenneth Rocafort version of Superman, or like an anime style, kind of like a Jim Lee looking Superman in the face. Whereas the David Corenswet Superman is more like the all-American looking Superman. He looks a little bit like Superman from All Seasons. He looks a little bit like Superman from All-Star. He has more of a little bit less chiseled features as David Corenswet. He still has the dimples and everything, but he looks a little less chiseled than David Corenswet. So they're just different looks and different takes. I don't think there's a win or a loss here. It's just kind of what your preference is. The hair. Henry Cavill had two different hairstyles. One was kind of like the just regular poofy looking, a little bit messy hair for Superman. The other one was the tight comb over and the really like slick back look, which I wasn't a big fan of. David Corenswet kind of has the open flowing hair, which has always been Superman's thing in the comic books. We did see the slick back hair a little bit with Christopher Reeve, but with that being said, Cavill never had the S-curl, the spit curl in front, which David Corenswet does seem to have a lot of times, which I do like. And you do see there are times where he has the slick back hair, but obviously through flying and everything, the hair is going to fly all over the place. So I'm not so big a fan of the gelled back hair for Superman. I kind of do like his hair to kind of be flowing in the wind and stuff when he's flying. So I kind of give that edge a little bit to David Corenswet in terms of what I like. But again, I'm not mad at the Henry Cavill look for Superman. If you look at their physicality, Henry Cavill is 6'1", David Corenswet is 6'4". Superman is listed as 6'3", 235 pounds in the comic books. And David Corenswet said he was at most 238 pounds, but that was during his bulk. So he looks like he probably leaned out for this role a little bit at the end of his bulk. So he's probably around like 220, maybe 225 at the absolute most. They asked Henry Cavill how much he weighed, and he said because Superman has a listed weight in the comic books, he doesn't want people to be comparing and contrasting too much between what his actual weight is versus the weight of the comic book character. So I feel like maybe he's closer to the 200 to 210 range, a little bit off of that 235 mark. So I would say 6'4", 220 to 225 is probably a little bit closer to what it is in the comic books. But in terms of the look, if you look at Henry Cavill's physicality, he has all of the muscles and everything, especially in Man of Steel. He definitely had a lot of size in there, whereas David Corenswet, he did have size in some of the pictures that he had on Instagram when he was lifting, but in the actual movie, we don't get to see it as much because he's wearing a lot of baggy clothing, and that kind of takes me right into the next part of it, which is the costume. And the costume is very, very key here. It is a little bit of what your preference is. With Henry Cavill's suit, he is wearing a muscle chrome suit underneath his actual Superman suit. Now, I only want to talk about the Man of Steel suit because this is David Corenswet's first suit in his first movie, and in Henry Cavill's case, the Batman v Superman suit did get updated a little bit. It did have some more color added to it, but it also had a thicker muscle suit. It wasn't so much that they made the muscle suit in the shape of his muscles and just kept it that way. They gave it a little bit extra padding, as you could probably see. But let's go back to Henry Cavill's suit. So the reason why he has the muscle chrome suit is because if you're a cosplayer, you know this. I am a cosplayer, I do have muscles, and they don't show in costumes. They don't show at all. So what they did with Henry Cavill's suit was they basically created a chrome muscle suit that he would wear, and they kind of used his actual musculature to kind of create that suit. And then they basically kind of like glue the suit onto the actual super suit. They glue that onto the muscle suit. and they kind of like make sure the ridges in the muscle suit are available there and seen there. But then they also had a lot of shading in like the arms and the abs and everything, and you got to see a lot more of that in the BVS suit and the Justice League suit. But I personally am not a huge fan of Superman flexing his muscles all the time in a way that's not actually natural to the character flexing his muscles. It's more so the suit is built to make it look like he is built. So if you see someone as a cosplayer wearing a suit like that, like if you look at Homelander, Homelander is not a big dude, and he wears a big muscle suit with a lot of muscles and a lot of the abs and everything built into the suit. So it makes him look jacked even when he's not jacked underneath. But regardless, Henry Cavill is jacked underneath. The suit is just meant to show that he's still jacked. But people from the outside, they can see that this suit is not a regular suit. That the muscles in the suit are not just the regular muscles being moved around because there's no actual fabric. But it's a little bit different because Henry Cavill's suit is a Kryptonian suit. And it was a suit built on Krypton. This was actually designed in Krypton, and it was kind of like an undersuit people would wear in the armor and stuff like that, underneath the armor, and that's the suit that he's wearing for this. Whereas David Corenswet's suit, it looks like a homemade suit. It looks like a suit his mom made him, which is a storyline that's happened in the comics many, many times in the past. Very recently in Birthright, done by Mark Waid, he talked about how his mom made his suit. But that was a thing that's been done in the comics before, that Superman's mom used the materials, that the blanket and everything, to create Superman's suit, and also created his cape specifically from the blanket, and the rest of his suit she made herself. And this looks like it would be a homemade suit. Whether it's the stitching, whether it's the shoulder pads, whatever it is, it looks like something his mom probably made him. And obviously his mom in this movie is a little bit older, so I feel like it fits even more so, giving him the underwear on the outside. Maybe that's something she thought would look good. Maybe she thought of like the strong men back in the 30s and 20s, and she kind of thought maybe it would be a cool look for him. But regardless, it's a little bit less of the slick, James Gunn had a good way he put it. He said he didn't want the wet t-shirt look. And that's the thing that they kind of created for Cavill's suit. They made it look like a wet t-shirt. And if you look at Ben Affleck, who's not nearly as jacked as Cavill, his bat suit also had that wet t-shirt look, where it looked like all those muscles were already there and built in, when he wasn't that big, but it made him look massive. And I think that was the point of those kind of suits. It's like the Homelander suit. And they're not necessarily my taste, because Superman should not be someone who's constantly showing people just how big his muscles are. It shouldn't be about that. He should be someone who's a little bit more humble, but again, it's a different look. So in the comic books, someone like Jim Lee, he draws Superman with a lot of musculature. He draws him like really ripped, kind of like an anime style of drawing Superman. If you look at someone like Frank Quitely, who drew All-Star Superman, he draws Superman in like a less form-fitting Superman suit. And if you look at some of the earlier stuff in the 30s and 40s, he obviously had a little less musculature showing than he does in today's day and age. So Henry Cavill's suit was made to look a little more contemporary, whereas David Corenswet's suit is a little bit more harkens to the classic look. So outside of all of that stuff, I think the biggest difference for me, why I would like David's suit more than Cavill's suit, is the colors. The colors for the Man of Steel suit were atrocious. And everything was extremely muted. The blue was a very dark navy-ish kind of blue. It also had a little bit of hints of green and everything going into it. The yellow wasn't a bright yellow. The red wasn't a bright red. It just felt like everything was very, very muted. And Superman's supposed to be inspiring people. I didn't like that the colors were that muted. Whereas if you look at David Corenswet's suit, it is bright, it is shiny. You can see him in the sky anytime he's passing by. Doesn't matter if it's a cloudy day, you will see Superman in the sky. So I'm also going to give that edge to David Corenswet. So in terms of appearance, I mean, if you want like the model-like features of Henry Cavill, I understand. If you like his chiseled look and the chiseled body and everything and flexing the muscles all the time, I understand. If you want a little more of a gym bro Superman, I get it. But David Corenswet probably embodies what Superman should look like a little bit more than that. Next, I want to move on to personality. So I would say Cavill's personality was very, very stoic, we didn't really see much from him, whether he was saving somebody, whether he was having a fight with someone. We'd see him get a little bit angry, but we wouldn't really see him too expressive. I'd say David Corenswet's probably the complete opposite. His character is very expressive and we see a lot of emotion from him. And again, this is not Cavill's fault. This is obviously direction by Zack Snyder, the type of Superman he wanted. You see a lot more from David Corenswet. You not only see a little bit of swagger in his personality, but you get to see a little bit of the charm. You get to see a little bit of the dorkiness. You get to see a little bit of the fun that he has when he's hanging out with Jimmy. David Corenswet's Superman, he seems to have actual emotion. He makes comments, he makes jokes, he does whatever it is, it seems like there's a little more emotion and expressiveness in there. Whereas David Corenswet's Superman, Henry Cavill's Superman, he has a little bit more of a stoic approach to everything, and that's fine. You can do a stoic Superman, and stoicism is something that's often associated with Superman. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you look at Superman in like Kingdom Come, that's a lot closer to this Superman that Henry Cavill has than Superman in, let's say, Birthright, or Superman in For All Seasons, or some of the classic Superman stories. So it kind of depends on what you like in that approach. If you like the more stoic Superman, Henry Cavill definitely embodied that. If you like the more fun Superman and the more expressive Superman and a little bit of emotion in your Superman, I feel like David Corenswet kind of embodied that a little bit better. Next, I want to talk about the approach that each Superman takes to actually going about their daily business and fighting crime and everything. Henry Cavill's Superman was I would say, more confrontational. He was a little bit more aggressive. He's more of a by any means necessary type of Superman. Because if you look at, for example, if you use Batman v Superman, even when he saves Lois in the desert, he runs that terrorist right through the wall. And that's a regular human. He probably broke some bones. He probably had internal bleeding. Who knows how he was handled. But Cavill saw that his girl was in danger and he took it upon himself to run that guy, literally fly him right through a wall. And if you look at the way he approached Batman, he literally kicks the Batmobile, then threatens him and says, "It's finished and consider this mercy. You're no longer Batman," essentially telling him. He said, "Next time they shine your light, don't go to it. You're done." And again, that's pretty aggressive. But then when the actual fight happens, he knows that he's being manipulated. They're both being manipulated to fight each other. But still, that doesn't stop him from putting a little bit of a beat down on Batman before the kryptonite thing kicks in. He literally tosses him like 60 feet and then runs him through a building. Flies a regular human like Batman through a building, then throws him through the bat signal and tells him, "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead already." Again, this is a very aggressive version of Superman. He also needed to take down Zod, so he snapped his neck. Needed to take down Doomsday, so he stabbed him to death with the spear. I say stabbed him to death like he was stabbing him multiple times. He stabbed him once with the kryptonite spear, but regardless, he had to take Doomsday out. So he's a by any means necessary type of Superman, and he's willing to do whatever it takes essentially to make it happen. The David Corenswet Superman, I feel like he's a little bit more of the big blue Boy Scout that we've known to like read in the comic books and stuff like that. He basically told Lois that he's not representing anyone but himself and doing the right thing. So it's about doing the right thing, and it was about not letting people die. And we get to see a lot of that where he's saving people and he's saving them consistently, and he's doing it with a smile to the point where we've seen a clip where he hugs a bunch of children after he's made a big save. Whereas if you look at Henry Cavill's Superman, he looks like it's laborious. Like he is saving people with a stern face, and he is not, it doesn't seem like he's that into his job and he's enjoying his job. He's just kind of going about his job. It's very businesslike, like I am Superman, I'm supposed to save you, I'm gonna save you. And that's what it seems like a lot of the interactions are. Let's talk about their alter ego, Clark Kent. So Cavill's Clark Kent is, I would essentially say he's basically how his Superman is, but in Clark Kent form. So he's a little bit confrontational, he's a little bit aggressive. Perry White tells him not to pursue the Batman story. He fights Perry White on it. He's very stern. He doesn't take jokes well. When Perry says, "Don't let him steal your lunch money in Gotham," he has a very matter of fact, "I'm gonna go about my business, I'm a serious reporter" kind of mentality. Whereas Clark that we see in David Corenswet's Superman, he's a little bit more bumbling. He seems a little more goofy. His hair is a little bit different. He's wearing oversized clothing. The Henry Cavill Superman wears tight clothing. Hair looks almost the same as when he's Superman, and it's just a pair of glasses that separates him. And I feel like he's not really making much of an effort to try and hide that Clark Kent is not Superman. I mean, it would be very easy to draw that association that this serious dude who's built like crazy and always wears these tight shirts and stuff like that could be Superman if you just take the glasses off and squint a little bit and you kind of see the Superman right in him. But the David Corenswet Superman, a lot of people wouldn't draw that comp to him because he has a little bit more fun. He has a little bit more personality. Also, kind of like what I was saying earlier, when you see him interacting with Jimmy, Henry Cavill's Clark doesn't seem like he has friends outside of Lois. It seems like Lois is his best friend. He also talks to his mom, and that's about it. Whereas David Corenswet's Superman seems like, his Clark Kent seems like he has friends, seems like he goes out, seems like he does things, seems like he'd probably be the kind of guy you'd want to go grab a burger with. He seems like he'd be a fun person to hang out with. So it's a little bit interesting to see the different takes that they both have on it. So next I want to talk about their ideals as Superman, and I feel like this can be kind of reduced down to just one thing, which is their relationship with their parents, their upbringing essentially. I feel like this is very important to point out because it's probably the one thing that the Snyderverse messed up on more than anything else, and that's the relationship he had with Ma and Pa Kent, because as a Clark Kent and as Kal-El who comes from Krypton, who doesn't know any language, doesn't know anything, he's shaped by his parents. He's created and molded into who he is based on those values of the Kansans and the Midwestern values that they have, whether it's on family, whether it's on saving people, whatever it is, that kind, nice farm boy personality, that is supposed to be shaped by their parents. And Jonathan Kent, Kevin Costner, while I love the actor, they did a terrible job of making him a good parent to Clark to give him the values that he would need to become Superman one day. Because if you think about it, Clark as a kid saves a bus full of children and he tells his dad, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to let him die? And his dad says, maybe. Which was crazy. Crazy that his dad would say, maybe let these kids die so that your secret stays safe because you have a bigger goal in life and you have something bigger and the world isn't ready for it. And then he follows that up again later when he has that tornado scene, which I hated also, because technically speaking, Clark could have gone back to save Shelby, their dog, and no one would think it's power-based or anything like that. Even if the truck fell, he could just pull his leg out. They would have no idea that it was like anything power-based. He could have just got out of there. But regardless, Jonathan did it, and then he got stuck, and he broke his ankle, and he told Clark to let him die to save his secret because he thought the world wasn't ready. And although he told him something like, well, once you decide which man you become, good or evil, that guy's going to change the world. For him to think the greater good should mean more than the lives of some children or the lives of his father or whatever it is, that is not the message that Superman should be getting from his dad. And that kind of creates the kind of person he becomes. Because as a kid, as Clark, he's saving these kids. Once he gets a little bit older and they're in the car, he tells his dad he wants to go search for who he is. His dad says, no, just try to be a farmer or whatever. And he says, I don't even know why I'm talking to you. You're not even my real father. Which is crazy for Clark to say that to his dad. But you can chalk that up to being a teenager or whatever it is, whatever excuse you want to make for it. Later as an adult, he goes to the priest and he says, I don't think Zod can be trusted, when he tells him, what are your instincts? And then he says, the problem is, I don't think humanity can be trusted either. So Clark as an adult still doesn't believe in humanity. And then later, when that whole scene goes down with the explosion in Batman v Superman, he tells Lois Superman was never real. It was just a dream of a farmer in Kansas. And when she puts her hand on his chest and says, this stands for something, he says, on my planet it did. This is not my planet. My planet is dead now. And although later he does come back and say, this is my planet, this is my world, you are my world to Lois, it still doesn't, him essentially getting to that point doesn't necessarily mean that his ideals weren't aligned the right way and he didn't have the right upbringing to create those ideals for him. It's kind of like a huge journey for him to get to a point where he sacrificed himself for the world, because now he feels like it's his world. Whereas if you see the comparison to David Corenswet's Superman, his dad literally tells him in this trailer the only words we get from his father, which are your choices, your actions, they are going to make you who you are. They'll make you the man that you are. And his mom, he's staring at something, maybe in the TV, maybe he sees it outside. She knows that he's ready to go out to battle, and she says, I got your boots, I cleaned them up, and I'll go grab them for you. They know that their relationship to him is to get him ready to be able to go out and fight crime. And when he's out there and he's fighting crime and he comes back and he's hurt and he's sick, they put him back in his room, they take care of him. They know that's their role in this. That their role is just kind of be a catalyst to help him be the man that he's supposed to be. And they shape him with those kind of messages. And like I said, it's those Midwestern values that Superman is supposed to have that it felt like Pa Kent didn't give him. And Ma Kent didn't give him. Jor-El felt like he gave him a lot better messages than Pa Kent and Ma Kent did, which is crazy, because if you look at Ma Kent, she might have said a lot of the right things, but in Batman v Superman, Henry Cavill's mom says, be their savior, be their angel, be their monument, be whatever they need you to be, or be none of it. You don't owe this world a thing. And these are crazy statements for your mom to be making. And it gets Superman to a point where he doesn't trust humanity, he doesn't care to save the world like that, and he doesn't value what humans think of him. And to the point where he even says probably the most egregious line in Superman history, comic book, movie, TV show, whatever. In Superman history, Henry Cavill's Superman says, when he's talking about the fight with Batman, he says he has to either convince him to help or he has to die, and he follows it up with this line, nobody stays good in this world, Lo. Which is crazy to think that Superman would say, nobody stays good in this world. Superman is supposed to be the symbol of hope, and he himself does not have hope. He's going through self-doubt and struggling all through Man of Steel to figure out A, who he is, and then all through Batman v Superman to figure out whether or not he should be helping humanity in the first place. And then determines nobody stays good in this world before Ben Affleck's Batman is about to kill him with a kryptonite spear, and now suddenly they connected because both of their moms are named Martha, so now Batman knows he's a little more human than he essentially thought he was in the beginning. Regardless, forget the story aside, the fact that Superman says that to Lois and goes there thinking he might have to kill Batman is crazy to me. And that is not the ideals of Superman. And again, we haven't seen that much from David Corenswet's Superman, but the fact that James Gunn said he's kindness in a world that thinks kindness is old-fashioned, I feel like that is exactly what Superman represents. Okay, so next I want to talk about their power sets. So obviously we saw Henry Cavill do a lot of cool and powerful things and a lot of cool power feats to the point where he beat down Steppenwolf and easily used his heat vision to laser off a chunk of his head. So he's very, very powerful. He made very short work of a new god, Steppenwolf, who is very powerful, who is giving Wonder Woman trouble. And then we see David Corenswet Superman. A lot of people have complained he spent the entire trailer getting his ass beat, which I understand and I get your point of view. But I think this is kind of the way that these directors want you to look at these characters and what angle they're looking at it from. So Henry Cavill's Superman is a godlike being learning to navigate living with humans. Whereas David Corenswet's Superman is a human, essentially, how he's raised, how he acts. He thinks he's one of us. He thinks, I'm one of you guys, don't treat me any differently. And we can kind of see that in the power set also. I feel like Henry Cavill's Superman is kind of like, it's essentially a Dr. Manhattan trying to deal with human problems. Whereas if you look at David Corenswet's Superman, it is a Kansas farmer's son dealing with the big city and struggling with dealing with problems in the big city, but he has superpowers. So again, it's a very different take and two very different styles of how you're looking at these characters. And I think something like Superman snapping Zod's neck, killing Doomsday, and taking out Steppenwolf easily before looking down Darkseid eye to eye, that is a very different take. Someone who's essentially all-powerful right off the bat, Whereas if you see David Corenswet Superman, it feels like it's a little bit more about he needs to have a little bit of restraint and hold back. And it feels like he's constantly holding back, whether he was fighting the kaiju, whether he was fighting the Hammer of Baravia, or whether he's fighting the engineer or whoever he's fighting. It seems like he's trying to avoid hurting people. And I feel like that kind of resonates a lot with Superman. If you remember the animated series, Superman in the very final episode, he has had a lot of episodes where he got beat up a little bit. In the final episode, he kind of lets loose on Darkseid and says he feels like he lives in a world of cardboard and he's always having to hold back, but Darkseid can take it so he can finally let loose. And I think that's a very cool scene, and it's made a lot more powerful with the fact that he hasn't been letting loose the whole time. You don't see all-powerful Superman 24/7. You see him holding back as much as possible, allowing others to kind of shine and allowing others to inspire and leading others to inspire, but not kind of doing it while knocking people's heads off. You know what I mean? Not necessarily about just snapping the neck and killing people and stuff, but just showing how powerful he is, showing that he's a godlike being. I mean, if you look at Henry Cavill's saves, his Superman saves, he's literally worshipped like a god. And if you look at David Corenswet's, yes, half the people hate him just like half the people hated Henry's in Batman v Superman, but the people who love him, it's not that they worship him like a god. They look at him as like, he's a really cool guy. He's a cool dude. They just record him flying and stuff like that. They're in awe of him and he inspires them, but they still look at him as more like one of them. Not so much like he's just this alien god being. And that's the thing, a big problem with Superman is he a god trying to fit in as a human, or is he a human with godlike powers? And I feel like those are the two different takes that these guys had. Zack Snyder he showed his take on Watchmen and Dr. Manhattan, but I feel like he kind of took that to the next level with Man of Steel and BVS and Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was all about Dr. Manhattan essentially trying to fit into the world. He wanted to do a very different take on Superman, and he did. And if you like that, more power to you. But this version of Superman, my final take, David Corenswet Superman, I think is a more quintessential Superman who embodies Superman's actual values, who has Superman's actual colors, who's doing a lot more Superman things. And he actually looks like he enjoys saving the world. Anyways, guys, tell me what you think. Who do you think is a better Superman, and why do you think they are a better Superman? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let me know.
This is the Mark of Night, and I need you to like, comment, and subscribe.